I'm here with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for giving me a few minutes. All right. This is crunch time for you and your office. Early voting began a couple days ago. We saw record turnout the first 2 days. I have you here. Give me the numbers for day 3.
Well, day 1 and 2.
Day 1 and 2.
We had just about even numbers, 134,000 both days, miraculously. That's 268,000. And that's really running at presidential levels, what we saw in 2020. Mm-hmm. And well above what we had back in 2018. 4 years ago, we had 70,000 show up on the first day. We had 134,000 versus about 150,000 we had in 2020.
Look, you've done this a while. What does that tell you about turnout? Is this, in your head, definitely a high turnout, or how much of this do you think is behavioral change?
Well, I've said this is a turnout race. We knew that in 2018 we had 4 million people show up to vote. 2020 we had 5 million. And I said, the number will be somewhere in between, but obviously it looks to me like it's going to be closer to that 5 million than the 4 million. And so we've been preparing the counties since day one. Expect a large turnout, and the voters are responding. They're very excited.
Talk to me about recruiting election workers. I mean, there's been a high profile here in Fulton County where nobody wanted the job of supervisor of election in Fulton County. Tell me about your experience across the state.
By and large, the counties say we've got it covered, but it's tight. Mm-hmm. And some places it's a little bit tighter than others, but they do have it covered. But you just want to hopefully that no one gets sick and things like that, because everyone is just critically important. There's not a lot of people sitting on the bench waiting to come out in reserve.
How do you vet election workers? It's not, you pay them, but it's sort of a voluntary pool.
It's a voluntary.
Do you vet them now, considering the threats that have come in on people trying to manipulate election systems, things like that? How do you weed out bad actors that maybe are trying to infiltrate?
Well, they go through a process of poll worker training. I was up in Hall County when they were doing that back in the spring, and they're just really sitting in a classroom and they're going through that process. And so you're going to have some people that have one particular viewpoint, but you swear an oath to follow the law, follow the Constitution, and that's what your job is at the end of the day.
But there's no extra vetting. You don't look to see if these people have been election denialists or if they've been showing up. And I mean. Well, I guess if you're not doing that, should you be?
A lot of that will get weeded out in the process anyway. People say, "Oh, this is hard work." Yes, it is hard work. These are long days, but it's good work. It's honorable work, and your job is to stay on vanguard to make sure we have honest and fair elections for everyone that shows up to vote.
Given the high turnout, does it make you think that early voting should start even sooner?
Well, I think that we'll do just fine. We have 15 days of Monday to Friday, and then we have 2 Saturdays. Adding that second Saturday, I think, was really huge, because people that can't get off of work, then they have now 2 Saturdays to get out there. And I think we'll just have strong turnout. We have now 17 days. And any county that really is finding that their numbers are higher can add additional polling locations and open that up. And they've done that in years past. Sometimes also they'll start off for the first week with only so many precincts open, and then they expand that like weeks 2 and 3. So we're expecting right now, based on what we've seen in 2 days, we'll come back next Monday, but we're expecting strong turnout for early voting.
You say that these counties can add precincts for early voting. Can they add drop boxes?
No, that's really set by population. It's 1 for every 100,000 voters, but we're not seeing any instances of that. What you're seeing in this race, which is what we saw back in the May primary, we had 1,850,000 people show up to vote, which is a record, 800,000 more than we've ever had for a midterm primary. But we are back down to our 5 to 6% of absentee voters, which is our historical number. So people are showing up to vote in person, and it's going to be predominantly over 50% will be an early voting, and then obviously on election day we'll have expanded number of precincts, and we'll have then turnout on election day.
Walk me through counting of the ballots here. Look, we had to wait days. In a close election that's decided by 2 points or less, whatever race we're talking about, we could talk about yours, the governor's race, the Senate race. Do you expect that result by the end of the week? Will it take more than that? I mean, what's your estimation?
It'll be much quicker. People have to remember back in 2020, so the state election board, we gave the counties the ability that they could do pre-scanning. And so they were supposed to do all the scanning of the absentee ballots before the election. And you had 20 to 25% of the people vote absentee. Now we're back down to a historical number of 5 to 6%. So much fewer numbers of people voting absentee. And that's where the time is. But they can do all the pre-scanning of that and get those results. Then all they have to do is then tabulate. and that'll be much quicker. They also have to report by 10:30 the total number of outstanding ballots that haven't been counted.
So you feel like we'll have a good, at least, handle on what's remaining, what's not, on election night.
Election night, sometime.
Sure,
when
they say election night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning.
2 or 3 in the morning, but you'll have a good handle of where we are.
Let's talk about the safety of election workers. You have developed an app for, explain the app and what it's for.
It's a poll worker protection app. It's text-based, but every poll worker manager will have that. But it's really, if you see any situation, you type in what that situation is, you press the send button, then our election director and Jesse, his assistant, get that information along with the county election director, and if you want, you can also send that to local law enforcement. But it's really to give people information. Is it just an unruly person, or is it actually a significantly very dangerous threat level? So if law enforcement is coming to a poll working location, they know what they could be facing.
We know that many losing candidates now look at election denial as an excuse for their own loss, and it's a contagious. Maybe this seems to be contagious. We've seen already in primary seasons people not accepting. We have some general election candidates that are already skeptical of the results, and they haven't been counted yet. Do you have a plan to combat this election denialism that may take place on your side of the aisle?
Well, my very personal plan is I will not be disputing the results for my race. I know that we have honest and fair elections for everyone. In fact, we've been recognized by both the Heritage Foundation, which is on the right side of the aisle, and also the Center for Election Innovation and Research, which is on the other side of the aisle. We've been recognized for both of them being tops for election accessibility and security. We have honest and fair elections in Georgia, and I trust the results. And I'll trust the results for my race, and I would encourage everyone, when they run, you can accept the results. Yes, if it's so close, within 5 vote difference, something like that, you're allowed your recounts, you're allowed your challenges, thing like that. But at the end of the day, when you've gone through the lawful process, accept the results and realize that you just came up a field goal short.
It's interesting, in your own debate, you experienced, I guess it's the Libertarian candidate that's trying to appeal to election deniers. You're having to deal with this in your own race. How are you handling it?
Well, I've been pushing back about election denialism back after 2018 and 2020. Now, one side wants to only talk about the 2020, one side only wants to talk about the 2018. We've been pushing back from both sides.
Stacey Abrams still believes these voting rules, are suppressing the vote. Now, there's different ways. You hear that expression and people hear and they automatic, but her argument is you're just limiting options for people to vote, and it seems that the limitations are always designed for the left side of the aisle. What do you say to that?
Absolutely not true. We have now photo ID for absentee voting, and the first state to implement that was Minnesota. We modeled that law after Minnesota, who's been doing it for 10 years. By having photo ID for absentee voting, you eliminate those questions about signature match. When be sued by both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party saying it's subjective. We have an objective criteria. We have photo ID for absentee voting, just like Minnesota. We then now have 17 days of early voting. President Biden's home state of Delaware only has 10 days of early voting. And we have record turnout. We have record registrations. It's never been easier to vote in Georgia. And we have the money. We have the turnout.
Yeah.
We're seeing people show up to vote. So the facts are in the numbers.
Do you think the Republican Party has lost its moral compass when it comes to accepting so many character flaws in so many of their candidates? And I specifically talk about Herschel Walker.
Well, I'm really running my own race, and I won't really get into personalities, but what I will say is when the Republican Party really represents the best, highest ideals of our founder of our party, which is Abraham Lincoln, and then you go back to Jefferson and Washington, but those values, those are timeless values, and when we get back to that, we'll do just fine. But it gets down to integrity, it gets down to character, it gets back to just basic honesty and civil discourse. We have conversations with people, and a touch of kindness. Kindness, you can be a principled conservative like myself and still be kind and have conversations with people. And I think we get back to those values, our party will do just fine.
Let me ask you this, just in the way you vote, how much does character count for you when you decide on somebody's vote? Are you willing to vote against somebody that may share your policy goals, but their character is so flawed that it actually you're concerned that it might hurt your long-term pursuit of those policy goals with the party. How much does that enter in your decision to vote for somebody?
My decision really centers on integrity, character, and honesty. I think what I've shown is I'm going to stand for the rule of law, and I'm going to buck my own party if I have to, because what I do here, this should not be a partisan job. This is an impartial job. I am making sure that we have honest and fair elections for everyone. And that's so important to me, and it should be so important to every American.
Your experience with the January 6th committee, do you find everything they've been doing is credible?
Well, I haven't watched every single thing,
Sure.
but I think that...
But you've testified and you've dealt with them. Are they professional?
They dealt with me professionally, and they asked good questions. And I wanted to share what happened in Georgia, because there's so much misinformation, disinformation, going back to the election denialism from 2018, 2020. Here are the facts. This is what we have in Georgia. We have photo ID for all forms of voting now. We have record registrations, record turnout, and the results are accurate. We do 100% hand recount, and we get the same answer as the machines. What does that tell you?
What message should other Republicans take away from your primary victory and Governor Kemp's primary victory over election denialism?
I think integrity matters. You do the right thing, not worried about what the cost is, but at the end of the day, let the chips fall where they may. But when you do the right thing, you can always look at yourself in the mirror. You look in what your wife, your kids, your grandkids, and you know that you've done the right thing. But also, the most important thing is you lived up and you really, supported the model that we have of free and fair elections for everyone. We have a constitution, we have the rule of law, and that's what I lean into. And I wish that everyone would do that, because it's so important.
Anywhere from 10 to 15% of this electorate is going to split their ticket, we think. Give me the avatar of the person you think is this split ticket voter. My guess is you're trying to court them. Who is that voter in your mind?
I think it's a person just that has an awful lot of, they're just good people. Most people are good, and I think we have to go out and talk to them, and we need to make sure our message is heard. And so that's what I did for the last year and a half, 2 years, after all this disinformation was out there. And I just talked to people, because I leaned into, I think most people are good. You travel all over this country, all over Georgia. Most people are good. So lean into that. Lean into their basic goodness. Don't play with them. Just shoot them straight, give them the truth, and then when they ask questions, answer it. But answer it with grace and answer it with kindness.
I think you and I have spoken 4 or 5 times since the 2020 election. You seem the most at peace now than I've seen you in any of the whatever you want to call it, the intensity of the attacks, the spotlight. Have you evolved on this? Have you sort of your skin thicker? I mean, how would you describe your evolution over the last 2 years?
I have great confidence in the American people. I have the great confidence at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, the goodness rises to the top. And so I'm very confident.
So you ignore the death threats, you ignore the attacks now, better today than you did a year ago?
I just put that aside, because I know that most people are good, and that's what I'm leaning into, and that's who I'm talking to.
And your experience has played out that way so far.
It has.
Mr. Secretary, good to see you.
Good to see you, John.
Stay safe on the trail.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.